Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection out in New Jersey with Dr. Nicole Bonner. Nicole, can you get us started by just introducing yourself and reflecting on what it was or where you were at in life when you decided you want to become a chiropractor?
Sure, I'd love to, Ben. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me on your show today. I was very excited to be here. Anytime I get a chance to talk about chiropractic, it's a win. So it makes for a good day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my journey started when I was actually before I was even born. My chiropractic journey kind of started when my mom was a smoker actually her entire life. She started smoking cigarettes when she was 11 years old. And when my mom got pregnant with me, 48 years ago, she was still smoking, and she was kind of like a nervous person, a little bit like on the nervous side. And the obstetrician said, "Go ahead, keep on smoking. Use those cigarettes to manage your nerves through your pregnancy." And my mom did. And that was the thing that people did back then is what the MD said, that was like being spoken to by God, and they did what their MD told them to do, and she smoked throughout her pregnancy. And so when I was born, everything seemed pretty normal. I had a normal delivery, all of that. My first year of life had a normal development, all that. Everything seemed fine. And then one day when I was just before I turned 2 years old, my mom and dad took me to a friend's house, and I went into my very first allergy induced asthma attack. And it ended up being because I was allergic to the cats and dogs that were in their home. But that attack then almost killed me. I was in an oxygen tent for weeks, and obviously I survived. But my mom and dad took their little kid home. I was in one arm, and then in the other hand, my mom was carrying a bucket of drugs. And that's how I lived my childhood. I was on like 3 or 4 or 5 different medications just every single day. And I was the kid. I was that kid in school that was like, man, I couldn't run from like one wall to the other in the gym without being completely toast, without being completely winded and sucking wind, right? So by the time I was in the sixth grade, I was obese. I've actually weighed as much as I do now since I've been 11 years old, and I was significantly overweight. And that's kind of how my junior high school and then beginning of high school went. And then when I was 16 years old, man, you never know, right? I love BJ's quote, you never know how far reaching something you say or do today is going to affect lives of millions tomorrow. When I was 16 years old, my a friend of our family was over the house, and there was an incident at the house, and he said to my mom, "Why don't you take her to a chiropractor?" And my mom was like, "What?" like and the funny thing was then is that my dad was seeing a chiropractor probably for maybe like 20 years before that, because my dad had a really physical job. My dad laid floors for a living. So he saw a chiropractor all these years for the treatment of neck pain and back pain, but no one ever told him to take his sick, obese, depressed, fatigue, weak daughter to a chiropractor. So long story short, they obviously did. And when I was 16 years old, I got my first chiropractic adjustment, and that was it. It was like that first adjustment, it was like literally somebody turned the life energy on into my body. I can actually feel, I remember when I got my thoracics adjustment, I could actually feel energy going into my body, down my arms, into my fingertips that I never even felt before. And I remember that adjustment like it was yesterday. It was like 30 years ago. And that started my chiropractic journey. I was like, my whole life I wanted to be a medical doctor. And then I was like, shoot, man, if I can do for people what this did for me without drugs, I'm like, I'm in. And that's when I decided made the decision to become a chiropractor.
Amazing. So, can you reflect on sort of the pre-chiropractic experience you had leading up to chiropractic school? Like, how did you navigate life a little differently, knowing that you wanted to become a chiropractor? Did you take certain classes? Did you visit certain offices? Like, was there anything different that you did as a result of you taking on this clarity of wanting to go that path?
Yeah, so I got a job with a chiropractor. Like immediately when I was 16, I started working in a chiropractic office and I started as a chiropractic assistant. And from there, we went to, all kinds of seminars. And back then it was like a little bit more, I could be wrong, but I feel like it was a little bit more accessible and easier to find seminars that were grassroots chiropractic, straight chiropractic. So got a job with this chiropractor, amazing chiropractor, one of my dearest friends, Dr. Nita Milan. She practices here in New Jersey. And her and I kind of grew up in chiropractic because she was just starting out in chiropractic school. She was only like 24, 25 years old. I was like 16 or 17. And her and I started going to all these philosophy seminars. And I remember the first seminar that she took me to where I was just like enthralled with chiropractic. I heard Jim Sigafus speak, and it was like all the lights around me just went out, and all that I could see and hear and focus on was Sigafus up on stage, just talking about innate intelligence and the power of the body. And at that time, I really didn't understand what the heck he was talking about, but I did know that it was truth, and I did know that it resonated with me. So that's what I spent my time
Just not
doing.
to interrupt you, but just because Sigafus is not here anymore with us on this planet per se in the physical form, is there any like pearls of wisdom that stick out to you that you learned from Dr. Sigafus that you could maybe just share really briefly as a side tangent? I'm just curious, just because he's one of the most referenced names. Yet I very rarely interrupt people and say, but what were like the pearls of wisdom, or what was so special about how he distilled chiropractic down to a science? Could you maybe just talk about Sisyphus for a moment?
Yeah, so after those seminars, I spent a little bit of time with Sigafus actually in his office because I practiced for a chiropractor for a little while after chiropractic school out in Pennsylvania. And so we would go to his office. He would have these like small gatherings of chiropractors, and he would just on a Saturday morning we'd go out there and he'd just talk about chiropractic. And Ben, it's kind of hard to put into words, but it's not necessarily even the words that Sigafus spoke about chiropractic. It was how he spoke about it. And it was the way that he delivered the message that was so impactful. Like when he spoke, you felt chiropractic. And that was what for me, what was so unique and different about him is is the way that he delivered the message.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. I had the privilege to hear him speak and talk to him in his last years. It was amazing. Just to stand next to a living legend and just be like kind of helping him up the stairs at one of the seminars for our school when I was a student about 11, 12 years ago. I'm just curious if you could maybe just reflect on your chiropractic student experience going into school after having had those pre chiropractic experiences, working in an office, going to the philosophy seminars. How did it really help propel you onto the right path and like maybe put your best foot forward once you got to chiropractic school? And then maybe also touch on some of the different challenges you had to overcome or surprises you encountered.
Yeah, so shoot, Ben, there was a lot of questions all in one. Let's see. So, well, I think a lot of my upbringing contributed to my experience leading up to chiropractic school, and then obviously transitioning into chiropractic school. I was not raised in a chiropractic household, and my parents were not chiropractors. So I am a first, I guess that you would call it a first generation chiropractor. And I actually grew up in a household that was actually the opposite of chiropractic. I just told you my story about how my mom was a smoker and I had asthma and stuff, but I pretty much lived on medication, and we ran the whole medical gamut from everything from I remember getting stuck as a kid with needles, for my vaccines, all the way through taking like a Tylenol for like the slightest sniffle or whatever. So I did not grow up in the chiropractic philosophy at all, but my dad had a very big influence on me going to chiropractic school. And there was something about my dad, we certainly didn't live the chiropractic lifestyle, but there was something about him. He was always very fit, he was always athletic. And on some level, he always recognized that the human body had an ability to self heal and to self regulate. And so my dad was very into things like yoga, meditation, martial arts, and he knew that the body was very powerful. So my dad also had this belief that he believed in living a limitless life. He did many things um that was evident in that, and he taught me the same thing. So he taught me how limitless we are, and that basically, we can do, and we can have anything that we really want. And so I got that first initially from him, and then of course my dad was a business owner as well. So my dad lived the American dream. He started from literally nothing, and then he grew a really nice business so that it provided a really good life for me and my mom. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so she was able to help me in school, and then she was able to guide me, and certainly made sure, Ben, that I stayed out of trouble. Which was not, when you have a kid and your kid loves adrenaline, and then you teach her that she can do anything, that's a little sometimes that leads to a little bit of trouble. So my mom played a role in like keeping me wrangled in and focused. And then, of course, I saw my dad working so hard. That rubbed off on me, and so I got a really strong work ethic from him. And I never really saw my dad stop. Like, even to this day, he still works. He's well into his 70s, and the guy still, like, he'll still lay carpet if he needs to, right? And so I never saw him stop. I never saw him give up. And I think that for me, that's what just propelled me to just kind of put my head down and just go. Like, it wasn't even ever a question or an option. There was no plan B. Like, plan B didn't even exist. Like, this was what I was doing, and that's just the way that it was, right? Um, so I think that's really important too for chiropractic students who know that they want to become business owners, because owning a chiropractic practice is more than just hanging up a shingle, right? It's, you gotta take a lot of no's before you get a lot of yeses, right? And so I always felt like the 3 C's were so important. So I lived by the 3 C's: have confidence, have certainty, and have conviction. So that kind of led me into chiropractic school. And I think there was a second part of your question, Ben. Would you refresh my memory on what the second part of the question was?
Absolutely, yeah. As a chiropractic student, just reflecting on any paths that you took, like specific paths that you took. Were there any clubs you were interested in? Did you have any specific mentors that really guided you in a specific direction? And then, yeah, any specific challenges you had to overcome or adversity that you dealt with?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So mentorship, I thought, was key for me. I seeked out When I was in chiropractic school, I would seek out anybody that would pour into me. So anybody that would give me the time of day to come, let me see their practice, let me hang out in their practice, even just spend time with me, talk philosophy. If they were willing, I was there. I took advantage of every one of those opportunities. Um, and certainly had a lot of mentors. But yeah, when I was in chiropractic school, when I was probably like halfway through school, so getting to my second year, I actually did hire a coach back then. And you might not even recognize this program, but back then, a big coaching program was waiting list practice, WLP. And so I joined WLP as a student, and that was transformational for me. That was the best thing I totally could have done, because for a couple of reasons. Number one is I was taught from the very beginning the right way to build a practice and the right way to build a business. So, doing it that way, I didn't have to reinvent the wheel and make a bunch of mistakes. I got taught the right way for the first time. And then the second part of joining a group like that for me was the networking. I was immersed in chiropractors around, and I was surrounded by chiropractors. I was socializing with chiropractors. I was doing a little partying with chiropractors that were doing really amazing things in chiropractic. And I wanted to do amazing things in chiropractic. So that gave me the opportunity to be around other people who were doing what I wanted to do. Um, some of the challenges, I would say, during school, I can't really think of any specific challenges during school, because in school you're like in this safety zone. You're in this bubble. You have, student loans that are financially supporting you for the time being. You're surrounded by like-minded people. You're surrounded by other people who believe like you believe, that talk like you believe, that act like you act, and so I can't think of any like significant challenges that I had during school. But I would say one of my scariest moments was when I was coming toward the end of school, probably when I got into that last year, where I knew in the next, 8 to 12 months, I need to leave the nest, right? School being my protective bubble, my protective nest. And I've never been to jail, just so that you know. but but I always in my mind kind of related leaving chiropractic school, like kind of like somebody like getting out of prison and having to reimmerse themselves back into the world. And that was really scary for me, because I was kind of afraid of re-entering the outside world. I was, first of all, it was difficult for me to relate to people who were not chiropractors. Like, that was a challenge for me. And so, people like, now I was different. I was a different person coming out of school than I was going into school. So I didn't think like other people. I didn't talk like other people. I didn't act like other people. I was different from other people. So there was no way in my mind that I was moving back to where I came from, because there's no way I was going back home and just picking up where I left off. It would have been impossible. I wasn't even nearly the same person. And so for me, then, that was probably the scariest part of going through the whole transition of going from like a college student to a doctor, for sure. Especially chiropractor.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, it's that moment right there where you're re-entering the world after chiropractic school. You're definitely wanting to talk too much about things that maybe people are not interested in. Like, you've learned that it's important to take interest in people, but at the same time, like, you think you're really interesting because you've developed this whole new belief system, this whole new way of seeing the world and thinking about society. So anyway, let's fast forward. Like, where did life take you? What talk maybe just about the last 20 or 30 years? What's this narrative arc of life after chiropractic school? What's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's been amazing. First of all, I will say, if there are any prospective students or people watching this that are thinking about going to chiropractic school, is, just do it. I know, I guess I stole that from the Nike. Is that in the Nike commercial I stole that from, right? Just do it, man, because if you're getting that little voice in your head that is putting chiropractic school in front of you, and it resonates with you and it makes sense to you, then it's not just a job, but it's a lifestyle that you're being called to. And it's been such a great shoot, man. I've been a chiropractor for 23 years, and I can't imagine having a better life. Has it always been easy? Absolutely not. As I share with you, I'll go through some of the ups and downs, but I really couldn't imagine living a different life. And chiropractic is such a blessing to humanity that, if you think about chiropractic, um, even though most of the world doesn't even know what real chiropractic is. And in fact, I would argue, I might step on some people's toes here, but I would argue that a lot of chiropractors still don't know what chiropractic really is. But when you think about what we do as chiropractors, and you think about how the brain and the nervous system literally carries the essence of who you are, it literally carries the essence of who you are. And then when we have subluxations, the subluxations interfere with literally who you are. And if we think about that on a global level, then chiropractic is pretty huge, and it's world changing. It has the potential. It has the potential to be world changing. And so I knew this coming out of chiropractic school. So when came out of chiropractic school, I knew at first I didn't want to move home for the reasons that I shared with you guys. So I moved to California, and I applied for my licensure in California. And I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in California because I like the lifestyle. I'm a surfer. I love to be outdoors. I love to be active. And I was waiting. This is kind of a funny story, but back then, I don't know how it is now, but back then there was a waiting list to get your license, your chiropractic license in California. And so I was waiting and waiting and waiting all these months. I did everything I needed to do. I applied, I got all my transcripts in, and I took the test, and everything was done. I was just on the waiting list to be accepted because there was such a huge influx of chiropractors at that time going into the state. They were limiting who they were licensing at that time. And so, what I was doing in the meantime is I was doing two things. I was working in the Four Seasons as a receptionist. I think back then I was making like $11 an hour trying to live in California, and I was surfing every day. And so I had no money, but I was enjoying, surfing. And then at one point I was 98 pounds, Ben. I went down to 98 pounds because I was surfing so much and I couldn't afford to eat proper meals. That I was like a toothpick. So after a while, after I lost all this weight and I was like super skinny and I'm starving, right? I'm like, shoot, man, I gotta do something. What am I gonna do? Like, I don't have my license. And I got a phone call from a chiropractor who found me um, on the list from waiting list practice. So waiting list practice, I guess, kept a list of all the students that went through their program. She went through that list and found me on that list. So once again, there was like waiting list practice not only taught me how to be, a great business owner, but they also gave me so many connections, right? So um, so this chiropractor calls me up and she says, "Hey, I found you from the waiting list practice list. I saw that you hired them as mentor coaches when you were in chiropractic school. I have a waiting list practice, and I'm pregnant, and I need somebody to cover my maternity leave." And I was like, "Wow, this is fantastic." The answer is yes, because I'm starving. And I was like, "Oh, by the way, where are you located?" And she's like, "Well, we're located in the middle of Pennsylvania." And I was like, "Oh God, no." Like a girl that grew up on the coast and now like being asked to like live in the middle of land. I was completely landlocked. So I went out, I visited the practice, and I loved the practice. In fact, the practice was exactly the way that I wanted to practice. It was like the vision that I had for my own practice. So I said, all right, I'm going to go out. I'm going to, associate, and then I'll go back. My plan was to go back to California and actually open a practice in California. But over the course of that year, yeah, as you know, life changes. And then I got reconnected with who became my future husband and that I actually went to high school with. So, long story short, I finished out my commitment with this chiropractor and then actually ended up moving back to my hometown area and got reconnected with my family, got reconnected with him, got reconnected with my old friends, and built a practice and started building a life here.
I think that's a great segue to maybe try and tease out as many details as you can into the practice that you've been able to develop and build. Obviously, it's morphed over time and continually refining it to this day. But I'm just curious if you could maybe describe for any prospective students or current students, like what is the style of practice that you would, how would you describe it? Maybe talk about the visits, maybe talk about some of the details of how you take care of people, just to keep like a nice high standard on like how much consciousness needs to be had when designing the practice of your dreams.
Yeah. So, in fact, that's what I do. That's what I do now. I'll tell you how I got there. So I opened my practice, and as you all imagine, as you all know, you just don't open a practice, hang a shingle, and people come. That's not the way that it works. So you have to know a number of things in order to build the practice of your dreams. Some of those things include, first of all, finding a location, how to negotiate leases. You have to learn how to design a floor plan that works for the type of practice that you have, or that you want to have. And then you almost have to become a builder, because you have to, build out your space, right? And then once you have your space, you have to actually learn how to attract patients to your practice, right? So this is a whole learning curve. So I go through this whole learning curve. I open a practice, and it ends up being amazing. I ended up, the first couple of years, I was like fluttering right between like 100, 200 office visits a week. And then, my big dream was to always go for whatever reason. And I think this takes us back then to Jim Sigafus, because I remember way back when I was listening to him, his big thing back then was like, his big thing that he would say to people is that if you're not seeing 500 office visits a week, you're not really making an impact. Like that was a little bit of his message, because Sigafus was like hard, like he was very, certainly loving and loved chiropractic for sure, but he was like very like hard, very to the point. So I remember I had that stuck in my head, like, oh God, I got to see 500 office visits a week. That's my goal. That's my goal. That's my goal. So the first couple of years, I'm like building the practice, and I was at 200 office visits a week, and I was like, oh, stuck at the ceiling, right? I was stuck at the ceiling. And then I had a mentor. I hired a coach, and I've had a coach, by the way, and I highly recommend this to anybody that is serious about the success of their practice, and even not just their practice, but having successful and happy and fulfilling life, is find a coach that you resonate with, and hire them. Don't wait on that. Don't procrastinate on that, because here's the thing. It's going to be your coach that's going to say like one or two things that's going to get you to the next level. And for me, it was so simple. My ceiling was at 200 office visits a week, and I sat down with my coach, and I was like, I don't know what it is. I just can't break this ceiling. I just can't break through the ceiling. And then I asked him a really important question. So guys, if you guys are listening to this, write this down. The questions that you ask matter. So the better the question, the better the answer you're going to get, right? So I said to him, I said, John, what is the difference between me and the chiropractors that are seeing 800, 1200, 1500 office visits a week? I go, what's the difference? And he came back with something just so simple. It was so simple, and it was like a one-liner. And he said, based on what I've seen, he said the only difference between a chiropractor that's serving at 200 office visits a week versus a chiropractor at 1500 office visits a week is the level in which the chiropractor is immersed and convicted about the philosophy of chiropractic. In other words, the stronger, the more the chiropractor lived the lifestyle, the more they attracted people to them to also live the lifestyle. And it's so simple. And it was like a one-liner. It was one sentence. And at first, like my ego, Ben, have you ever had an ego moment? So at first my ego kind of stepped in and was like, you know what? Like, screw you, man. I'm like the most philosophical person. Like I never started out wanting to become a chiropractor to treat neck and back pain. I started from day one, like with above, down, inside out philosophy, like I started the philosophy club at Parker, right? I'm like, shoot, man, who are you telling me that I need to be more immersed in my philosophy? And then, once I had like that ego moment for like, 2 minutes, I got over myself, and I took what he said to heart. And then what it was taking what another mentor coach of mine told me to take, and that's the 18-inch journey. And the 18-inch journey is the journey from your head to your heart. And, see, I knew chiropractic in my head. I can recite, green books to you. I can recite the 33 principles. I knew all of this back then, right? And I had it here, but it was like working its way down, but it really wasn't here, right? I wasn't exuding it. It wasn't coming out of my pores, right? And so it was like a flip of a switch, and something inside of me changed, Ben. I just said, it's like, I can't even like pinpoint what it was. It was not a change in a thought. It was actually a change in who I was. It was like a different person from what he said. And when that changed, everything else changed. And then we went, in 90 days, the practice went from 200 to 500 office visits a week in 90 days. And then we went from 500 into just over 600, and we did that for about 12 years of practice. I stayed right around plus or minus that 600 office visit a week mark, and did that for a long time.
Well, that in itself we'll just consider to be what's called a high volume practice. Can you maybe just introduce students to what's unique and different about a high volume practice, maybe the intention behind it, and then also like from a real life experiential standpoint, like what it's like to have a high volume practice as a chiropractor, and like maybe what the benefits of it are, if there's any drawbacks, anything you can share.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal. I love serving at high volume. Um, it is exciting. It is energetic. It has a lot of momentum. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's never boring. You get to help a lot of people. And when you're serving at high volume, you're actually in a different physiological state than when you're serving at a lower volume. And so you're almost not thinking. It's almost like your mind is in a place that is in the more of a more so in the subconscious or the unconscious realm than actually in the conscious realm. And actually when you're over here functioning in this like unconscious competence, if you will, that's where I feel like a lot of the miracles happen. That's where you'll start just laying hands on people and you barely have to thrust, and you feel cavitation under your hands. That's where you adjust, and shoot, little baby, just little kids, and little. I had this little girl. She had eczema on 90% of her body, and she would bleed. She would come in every day, and her skin would be bleeding. She had blood all over her clothes, and within a week, the eczema cleared up. Like 99% of the eczema cleared up. Her skin was like totally clear. It was insane, so that's where you see like a life changing results in your patients. And you see people like, it's not only just about symptoms, but people walk in and they physically look different. They vibrate at a different level. They have a different physiology about them. They're sometimes, when you're functioning at that level, families are restored, marriages are restored. It's really quite a fascinating life to live at high volume. And I got to tell you, I would recommend it to anybody. I mean, it's no more work, really. In fact, it feels like less work. I have more energy adjusting 100 or 100 plus people in a day. I have more energy at the end of that day than I do adjusting, 50 people in a day. And I don't know exactly how that happens, but it does. And so adjusting more people in a day doesn't take away from you, it adds to you. It doesn't take away from your life, it adds to your life. And so one of the questions that a lot of young chiropractors have asked me, and it's kind of I think a fascinating question. I'd like to address it here with you if it's okay. A lot of younger chiropractors have said, I've always wanted to do high volume, but I'm afraid if I do high volume, it's going to take away from my family, because I've seen other high volume chiropractors, lose their family or lose their marriages or have bad relationships with their children. And, I want to make a point about this. And that is that if a chiropractor or anybody in any profession has challenges with their family, it's not because they're a high volume chiropractor. It's because there's some disconnect that's going on with that family member. But it's certainly not because they're having a high volume practice. In fact, I don't spend any more time in the office seeing high volume than I spent in the office seeing 200 visits a week. So it really has nothing. Having good relationships is about learning how to communicate and learning how to develop strong relationships, not only in your practice but in your home life and in your family life as well. So I don't know. I know it, Ben. I got off a track. I got off track a little bit with
No,
that.
you were right on the money. If we could keep building bridges here, though, between, say, a pre-med student and they want to make an impact on as many lives as they possibly can, and they're thinking the best way to do that is to go and become a medical doctor, how can we sort of just create a parallel narrative of chiropractic and not to compare it, but just to really speak about chiropractic at the center? Maybe for a pre-med student or maybe for a student who's a massage therapist or going to become a massage therapist or going to become a personal trainer who's going to become a nutritionist and they want to make a difference in people's lives. Like what you're discussing, I don't think we could really quantify in any way, shape, or form, but what you're discussing is really impacting more lives than people can really even imagine in their mind right now. Is that not right? Like, how would you kind of break it down for an 8-year-old of like, if you want to grow up and do what I do one day, well, I don't know if you really know what you're getting yourself into. But anyway, if you could just keep going, I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, so, well, it's kind of funny that you asked me that question because my whole life, in fact, prior to getting under chiropractic care, my whole life I wanted to be a medical doctor. In fact, when I was 6 years old, my mom had this weird, I don't know, she had like this weird health problem going on. And I remember when I was a little kid, we would go to like all these MDs and we went to all these endocrinologists and nobody could figure out what was wrong with her. Like it was horrible. She was like throwing up and it was really violent. And we took her to all. I remember going to all these doctors with her, and nobody could figure it out, right? But I was loving it because every doctor that we would go to, I was picking up, I was listening to how the human body worked and endocrinology and physiology, and I'm listening to these doctors and I'm picking up all this stuff, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, I want to be a medical doctor because this is just amazing. The human body, even as a little kid, as my 6-year-old self, I was like, the human body is so cool and it all works together. And I didn't understand the terminology back then, but I was like, even back then, I loved how physiology worked and how everything in the human body actually worked together. And I was so fascinated with it. I thought that I wanted to be an MD, but really what it was is that I wasn't attracted to the medicine as much as I was really attracted to the intelligence within the body and how the body worked, right? And so I think, we get a little bit confused when we're younger because I think people in science, people who like science, people like us, people who like the way the human body works and people who are fascinated by it, immediately their brain goes to, well, I'm just going to become a medical doctor, right? But the reality of medicine is that medicine is actually the antithesis of the way that the human body works. It actually works against the nature of the human body. And so a lot of people, I don't think would really realize that, especially MDs and nurses who they go down these paths. And a lot of them, especially nurses, Ben, they get into nursing school, and I can't even tell you how many nurses say, you know what, I regret going down that path. I wish I became a chiropractor or something like that, because it was, once again, it wasn't really medicine that they were attracted to. It was really the way the human body naturally functions. So I don't know if I'm answering your question right
You
now, but
absolutely are. You absolutely are. And I was just wondering, like, we can come back to this, but if you could just touch on Taproot conversations and anything else you're involved in these days, Just give us a rundown on like where you've decided to play and what gaps you've decided to address that you've been able to observe within the chiropractic profession, the practitioners, and also the students.
Yeah, so I was about, I don't know, 12 or 13 or 14 years into practice. And I always had associates in my practice because I have two awesome, beautiful boys. So I've always had associates. And I lost one of my associates. She had moved on. She was with me for about 5.5 years. And she had moved on to open up her own practice. And so when she had moved on to open up her own practice, I had to, for the first time in 5 or 6 years, interview chiropractic students who were getting ready to graduate. I had to interview them for my associate position. And so, Ben, when I started interviewing them for the associate position, I was like shocked. Oh, shocked shit. And the reason why was because what I was finding is that these students now, because remember, it's been a while since I had interaction with people coming out of chiropractic school, but the students were really not prepared well for practice. They weren't prepared for how to adjust. They certainly didn't have great communication skills, and but most importantly, Ben, they were completely lost on the chiropractic philosophy. And I had some students actually say, "Well, we don't even recognize subluxation." And when I heard that, I got scared. I got scared. It's like scared the shit out of me, and I was like, "What?" I was like, wait, what? Am I in the twilight zone? Like, am I interviewing for the wrong profession here? Because it scared me because I figured, shoot, if all these people are coming out of chiropractic school and they don't really even understand what they just invested $250,000 in, we have not only do they have an individual problem, but now we have a global problem because we have this beautiful gift to humanity, and nobody's going to know what it is. And that's when I decided that I was going to step away from full-time practice and start coaching chiropractic students and new doctors. And so that's what I've been. I started coaching with a coaching group, and I did that for about 6 or 7 years. And now just last year, decided to go off on my own coaching chiropractic students. So now I help chiropractic students start even way back, like what I did in chiropractic school, learning the foundations of what who do you need to become when you graduate chiropractic school in order to be successful in practice, but not only to be successful in practice, but also more importantly, to be successful and fulfilled in life. And so we start laying the foundation and the groundwork while these students are still in school. And then once they're ready to graduate, then we start teaching them how to build a business. And then once we teach them how to build a business, now I actually just took a whole group of young people through that program. And now they actually just opened their practices in January and February. And they're already, like, one of my students, his first week of practice was March 1st was his opening day. And he revenued just under $10,000 in his first week of practice. So it's, once again, it's not all about the money. I'm not saying that, and because it's about the money, but one of the top concerns that students have is finances and having financial security when they get out of chiropractic school, especially because they're coming out with a big debt. So I do what I do, not for the student, for sure, to help them, to guide them, to prevent them from making the mistakes that I've made that cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I also do it for just humanity, because I want to make sure that future generations are experiencing chiropractic the way that I experience chiropractic. I want to make sure that when you have a prospective student like I was, and they can hear somebody like Jim Sigafus speak, that those people are still around sharing real chiropractic, and so that chiropractic, the way that we know it, Ben, goes on. Because if it didn't, it would certainly be a huge disservice to the world.
Amazing. I feel like we could keep going for like another hour, but I was just wondering if you could maybe share some of the resources people could connect with you, like if you have a website or a blog or a podcast or any channels, YouTube or Instagram, anything And then also, just as a final wrap up, like what is some of the passion projects or visions that you've had that you would love to see the profession sort of emerge into or grow towards?
Yeah, so let's see. To answer your first question, probably there's a lot of resources. Well, one of the things I'm most proud of that we've worked really hard on is our Facebook group. It is a private group. You have to be a chiropractic student or a chiropractor or a prospective chiropractic student to get into our group. We have over 400 members in that group. The group is called Turning Students and Chiropractors into Business Owners. It's called Turning Students and Chiropractors into Business Owners, and it's right on Facebook. And we provide so many free resources on that group. Just about every single day, almost every single day, I'm posting in that group mindset hacks, practice tips, you name it, we post in it. Plus, there's a nice community of people where a lot of the chiropractic students are now the group's getting momentum. So people are starting to contribute, they're starting to ask questions, and it really makes for a nice network of people. Also, we are on YouTube. So my coaching program is called Thrive Chiro Coaching. So if you just like search that up on YouTube, all of the videos, podcasts, just there's a whole collection, there's a whole library of everything that I've done over the last year, and you can find free information on basically anything that you wanted to do in practice. If you have a question that is not, if I dare you, I dare somebody that's watching this to go look, tell me if you have a question that I have not answered. And if I haven't, please private message me and I will actually do a video, a free video that I'll post on YouTube to answer your question, any question that you have about chiropractic school or practice or mindset. I'd be happy to do that. But that's a really great resource. And then we have a website that you can always connect through us with. It's thrivechirocoaching.com, thrivechirocoaching.com. Or you know what, if you are informal like I am, just private message me through Facebook at Nicole Bonner. You can always find me. I'm all over Facebook. So you can find me at Nicole Bonner. So that's where you guys can find me. And then Ben, what was the second part of that question?
Just, any creative visions for the profession, any directions that you feel the profession needs to direct and focus its efforts and energy so that we may grow and be more connected and reach our full potential as a profession?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm working on now, we actually just launched a fourth program in the Thrive coaching program. The program is called ACT. It's a program designed for associates. And so basically what the program does is it coaches chiropractors who already have an associate position, but it takes the responsibility off of coaching, teaching, leading, training. The associate takes the responsibility off of the practice owner so that the practice owner can get a little bit more freedom from their practice. And I think, that is something that we need to explore as a profession is, how can we start to grow these practices so that we gain momentum and I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but these practices gain power. Because if we can learn how to grow these practices so that we have, practices with a multitude of doctors, kind of like MDs have done, then that's gonna, there's power in numbers, right? So that's just going to create, I think, a lot of momentum for the profession as a whole. And I think that it'll give the senior doctors an opportunity to have a little bit of freedom from the four walls of their practice so they can kind of get out of their own practices to once again mentor the younger people in their profession and still allow their practices to contribute to serve at the same level that it's been serving and also continue to grow without them having to be in their practice.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing with any students that are out there that were able to connect with this message in the upcoming years. It's going to just continue to just be a tree that people can come and eat some fruits off of. I think there was a lot in this conversation to unpack. And I hope that this becomes like discourse for the future generations to really learn from. So thank you so much for taking the time today, Nicole.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Ben, for inviting me.
Mm-hmm.